So with the presentation today, I looked at, a lot of the questions that we have about attack. And I'm a bit of a fan of trying to unlock the defense. So I really look at how I construct my attack based a lot about breaking down the defense, as opposed to going in with some pre-made plans. Sometimes you need to have an understanding when you're designing your attack strategy, how it's going to work against any given defense. So I kind of try and start there. We always have the principles of attack, and these are well publicized all over every rugby site in the world. That's basically the nuts and bolts of your attack. And I know you guys had Colin Cooper a week or so ago, and Coops's principles of defense are pretty much aligned with our principles of attack. And you can see there's a big similarity in them when we're talking about how we're trying to implement that. And I know that coaches of Coops's caliber, they keep these to the forefront the whole time. So it helps keep you on track, I guess, of what you're trying to do, about winning the ball, etc., go forward and all that. So we'll cover these points through this little webinar, I guess, and we'll try and expand on them and show you how ways you can use it in training and how it can work in when you're starting your planning of your design for your attack. So where do we start? So for me, this is how I look at it. So we need to start it. All our attack is going to come from the source. When we're looking at attack, where we're coming from, is it a scrum or a line out? What part of the field might be looking at? That's our location. What options will we have in our attack? What does the opposition defense look like? Sequence of play for me is, have you thought about that in such a way that you might go, we're going to go here, then we're going to come back to there. So you've got a couple of sequences in play. Time in the game can be an influence on how you design your attack or what you're trying to do. And obviously then there's your mindset. And mindset for me is relating to your players in a lot of ways. So that's kind of where we start. And then we have to figure out, okay, how do we train that sort of stuff? So source is pretty obvious. The forwards coaches out there, they love the scrums and lineouts. So that would be, that's quite an easy one for us to understand. But for me, it kind of, and this is how, for any of you who are familiar with some of the things I did when I was in Ireland with Connacht, what we looked at was the execution. So that's the skill. So we looked at what are the skills that we need within our attack, and we just focused on that. We focused on that for over a year, on the core skills, purely on the core skills. And then once you can do that, then you can perform the action. Okay. And then once everybody's comfortable, your mindset. So once the players are now comfortable with what you're doing, you'll find that they'll start to execute better. So for me, build that base first, get your skill level right. Then your platform. So how are you going to attack and what's your shape maybe is going to be? And then get your players familiar with it, and they'll start to buy into it a lot more, and you'll find that you'll get some continuity in your attack. All good so far, folks? Pretty simple stuff. Good. So execution and the skill requirements. So with everything I do, I really break things right back if I can. So for me, those are your basic skills that they should all be able to do, regardless of position, until it comes down to maybe these ones down the bottom here with your hooker and your scrum. But everybody should be able to catch pass. Their evasive running is part of an attack. I'm working with some young players at the moment here in New Zealand who evasive running is not something that they're strong at, because I got a couple of big Pacific Island boys who just run over people. But they're only about these guys are 14-year-olds, and they're probably about 120 kegs. So 120 kilo 14-year-old boy is quite dangerous. But I'm trying to get them into a little bit of footwork so they understand that as their development goes, they're going to be in a position to use that. Ball through contact, support play. So these are little things that we'll look at in great depth as you're designing or as you're working with your team. Some of the other things that we have to work on that are really important that are a skill, but we don't often see them and such, and that's our timing, so our depth and our width. How do we work together there? Because often we see so many plays will break down because of poor timing, players being too deep or too flat even. I'll show you some examples of video of that at the end. We need our players to be able to work under pressure, and we need them to have some good decision making. So that's the simple skill sets there that we would require. And the physical ones, it's pretty handy if they're fast, they're strong, and they're powerful. But there are times, obviously, you'll be with teams that won't have all of these attributes. You might have teams that have none of these attributes. Okay. But if you can be strong in these attributes over here, I think in some ways you can get yourself through until you can lift and pick up into these areas. Probably my physical training partners will disagree with me when I say that. So, but that's just my way of getting it. And I would always work hard in a preseason. So preseason is gold for this sort of thing. So you'd be working with your physical people anyhow as you're developing your skills. So we're going to talk about platforms. So we all know what the source is. We talked about scrums and lineouts, but we also have restarts and turnovers. So those are all access. Those are all ways that we can get the ball. And as soon as the ball is ours, we go from defense to attack. So it's our transition. So it's understanding how to do that quite quickly is important. I haven't got any footage, but there's a really good transition drill that I'll describe to you at the end. I use it training all the time. And it's a nice little attack to defense thing, especially if you've got large numbers at training. So when we look at our source and you're designing your attacks, then all of a sudden you have to ask yourself the big question, but where do they all come from? So, that's a lot of information there. That's a lot of, okay, what do we do from a left-hand scrum? What do we do from a right-hand scrum? What do we do from a middle? Are we on attack? Are we on defense? Are we in the middle of the field? All of these things, professional teams have to take into consideration. Club teams, pretty happy with what to do from a righty, what to do from a lefty, what to do from the middle when it comes to scrums. And lineouts should probably play to your strengths, whether you're going to go short in numbers. And short numbers in your lineout are really used a lot these days because they're trying to bring forwards into the back line to get into those 1-3-3 ones, 2-4-2 shapes, etc. So often they'll start with those forwards out there to kind of help make that a bit easier, I guess. As a backs coach, I'm not a big fan of it because that's just more people in the back line for me. I'd rather go from a full line out all day, especially. And I remember seeing footage last course. Bram, you sent me some footage through of some local games, and I thought the back play looked pretty good. So there'll be times, I'd be trying to make sure that some of those other teams have full lineouts. But that's just me as a backs coach, I guess. So obviously, that can blow you away when you look at that and you start and you get your piece of paper out at the beginning of the year and you're trying to design your attack. But, you can start and you can just start simple and build into that as you go. Not all of those situations are going to be relevant to you, So let's chuff on a bit from there. So just looking at our execution. So I think some of you would be familiar with those terms, would you? I think World Rugby often refer to people as playmakers, penetrators, etc. For me, playmaker, penetrator, yeah, fine. You need to have those options, though. So when you're down on your piece of paper and you're sitting around your players and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, everything should have more than one option. 100%. Every attack should have at least another option. Hidden within it, it might be, or it might be quite obvious. I would never go to any attack or any strike or anything like that without at least another option. So for me, penetrate is one option, and I'll try and get two others if I can. I can't recall if I used it in my last talk for you, but the navigator for me is, so that's the guy that sits in behind the pod. So if you've got a pod of 3, for example, or a 3+1 or a 4 even, we often have a back or somebody sitting behind the pod. I call that the navigator. And they have a massive role in my teams on attack. And they have a massive role in keeping our continuity and looking for options. So not only have they got the eyes to look forward, but they give me width. So often when our forwards will come around the corner in some of our attacks, they're often too tight to the halfback, or they run over on top of each other and things like that. So I use the navigator. That's why I call him the navigator. They run to where he is or she is, and that's where you got to set up in front of me. So it helps get some continuity in our carry group there if you're going to run pod type rugby. So they got a massive role for me, the navigator. I might show you some examples. You'll see some of the footage near the end here. So the requirements of these people here, for me, so setting early helps your attack, particularly if it's your navigator. They need to be good communicators, so your attack needs to have a lot of communication going on. Obviously, we need to go forward. A lot of times I like players to kind of show late into space. So these two kind of go hand in hand, showing late and deceiving. It's always good to have a little bit of deception in there. Changing pitches might mean you'll set up in one formation, ball goes into the scrum, and then you'll change to another formation while that's all happening. So the opposition, who are your defenders, will look up and see one picture, have a little talk, they'll get their plan going, and then by the time they look up again, the pitch has changed. So that's really common, and a lot of teams over here will do that. These people need to make sure they have good backfield vision. And then some clarity here about who are we picking on. And I'll go into this, who are we picking on, in a couple more slides to give you some ideas on that. But for me, that was a question that was asked for me by a really good player, a world-class player, asked me that question one day when we were running through some back attack strikes, and he asked me that question. That changed my whole way of thinking about attack, about back attack. From that moment on, I see things totally different, and I'm forever grateful that player pointed that out to me.
Dave, may I ask a question? Yeah,
sure.
Gabs. Yeah, Gab speaking here. On your last slide, you specified a requirement: show late. What does it mean? So I understand.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, Gabs, I should have explained that better. It's when a player will enter the line quite late in the movement. Mm-hmm. So often the opposition will look defensively, will look at what the attack looks like in front of them, so they can figure out who's got who, sort of thing.
Yep.
So, but a player arriving late, maybe from a blind side or coming in from an unusual entry point, can all of a sudden just change the picture.
Okay, I see. Okay.
So those guys are real dangerous. That's usually if you got a quick guy, they can be gold. I've got a piece of footage at the end too, Gabs, that'll show some footage from the World Cup of players using that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Cheers. Good question. Thanks for that. Don't let me get too far ahead, guys. If you need something, please ask. This is just talking about this is how you work with your team. For me, when it comes to mindset, and it's about being positive, and sometimes it's hard when the season gets a bit rough to be positive, but being positive is good. And positivity will often come from these things here, like some clarity, players understanding what they're doing and why they're doing it. brings a little bit more positivity. Some players will visualize, do some visualization, especially at the high level. A lot of big teams will do that. I'm a bit of a fan of repeated reps. So that's, oopsie, I'm just going to need to go back. I did one wrong click then, folks, and now I'm in trouble. So forgive me. I'll just get out of here if I can. No. So what was I talking about? Positivity. I'll carry on anyhow. So talking about visualization, some players do that. Repeated reps are really important. So if you get out there, we were brought out one day there to kind of, how can I put it? To be a little bit more gentler on our players and not repeat a lot of activities because they found it boring. But to be honest, if you want to do your attack and you want to be comfortable, you need to run it repetitively a few times, okay, just to get that sort of thing going. The last slide that I can't get back to had a picture of a book there. All our players have books. And you can do this at club level as well, at school level. Players have a book. They go home, they write whatever you did at training that night, draw pictures, however it works for them, so the information gets through. American coaches, and this is when I was coaching in America, the players want you to give them a playbook. I would not do that. Make the players draw it and write it themselves in their own words. Come to you to clarify, but don't give it to them, because I think they just won't learn it as quickly. So there's no ownership there. So encourage the players on courses for these guys, for IRANs. We'll check the books. We'll okay, show us your book this morning, guys, and we'll go around and have a look. And we'll do that in professional rugby as well. We'll ask the players to have a look at their books, especially the ones that we know might be struggling. All good?
Yep.
So, yeah, maps, which I've kind of lost a lot of my gusto from. But for me, destination try line is a term that we used when I was with Connacht, and Pat Lamb used it all the time when we were in Bristol as well. So I just love the term, because that's what it is. When we're designing a map or a set of phases, how to get to a try, how to score, that's our destination. And so we should keep that front of mind. We're laying this out because we want to get to the try line. Okay, so these are the various ways most teams will go. You'll either go the same way map, you'll go out and you'll come back sort of a map. You might go straight to the edge, or being direct. And now direct is an interesting one, because the last two, direct and edge to edge, are often things that we'll hear coaches talking about. Sometimes we want to go edge to edge, but at some stage we have to go direct, because remember, it's about what we're trying to do to the defense. And if we go edge to edge, and I'll show you some footage of that as well, some wonderful rugby, edge to edge rugby, wonderful rugby, but the team actually goes nowhere. And so it's great, continuity. I tick off how many rucks you ran and all that, wonderful stuff, but they're not actually going anywhere. So there are times where you need to be direct, and that's running down shorter channels, keeping closer to the ball, more players around the ball. It doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be a rolling maul every time. There are more creative ways you can do that, but it becomes part of the requirements. So if you want to play that edge-to-edge game, we'll talk about terminology later, but the old earn the right to go wide is quite a common call, and that's where that sort of combination comes in. So we have these sorts of things, and then of course we have our zones. So when you're designing your maps, you need to know where you're going to do them and how you're going to do it. So this diagram here, so we're talking about our zones. I've just called them red, blue, green. You call them whatever you like. And for some people, the red zone is defense. Some people, that's attack. I got red for ruthless, so that's where I'm trying to attack. For me, green zone, get the heck out of there, and the blue zone might be chill zone. So in that blue zone there, you'd probably play a lot more multi-phase. Green zone is customarily thought as let's just get out of here, but it's also a wonderful place to attack from. A wonderful place to attack from. Sorry, I'm going to tell another story. So 2016 final for the Pro 12, it was in those days. We were Connacht and we were playing Leinster in the final in Edinburgh. For the first 5 or more minutes of the game, Leinster had the ball and they attacked and they attacked and they attacked and they attacked and they got right down to our try line and we got a turnover. So they thought we were going to kick, but we didn't. Instead, we ran the ball to the edge and we ended up getting held up just short of the try line at the other end. So because of that, they all thought we were going to kick. They all dropped back. We had space on the outside and away we went. So don't discount the green zone or your green zone or your defensive zone there as being an area that you can attack from. You just need to make sure you've got the skill set to do so, because a drop pass or wrong or a mistake in this area can cause you all sorts of grief. All good? Up here for our maps. So these maps are about, how far you're going to operate, where you're going to hit, maybe if you're going to set multi-phase, and then where do you go from there? Are you going to go that way or are you going to come back to here? So those are the little zones that you'll probably pick to aim for. Pretty simple so far, everybody?
Yeah, very clear.
Cool.
Thank you.
Lovely. So, shapes. This is what I see a lot of my questions are. And for me, that's all about players in motion. So your shapes, players in motion and attack are far more compelling to me than ones that are just standing around. So everybody should have a job. Everybody should have a job. So whether you know the ball's coming your way or not, you do have a job still. So these would be our common shapes. Sometimes, if I was creative, a bit more creative, I'd like to think of ways that we don't have to have them. But the way the game is played at the moment, it gives us some sort of structure and helps get our players around the field and open up space. But all these shapes are designed to open up space and to find and to exploit defenses. But it's how we run them that makes the difference. And what our mindset when we set them up makes the difference. So every team runs them. Some run them better than others. And it comes down to some of those things we talked about earlier about working hard off the ball, getting set early. And a lot of that sort of stuff, because I noticed one of you guys have asked a question about getting players to work harder off the ball. Sometimes it's just coming down to pointing out to them how bad their running lines are initially. So we're not running in big arcs. We're running L lines. We're getting straight to where we want to be, turn around the corner and get set to go. There's lots of activities you can do to promote that. Even simple race activities. So you might have 2 pods against each other. They start on their bellies. Coach blows the whistle. One team's they're both going to be against each other. First one to shake, they get the ball nice and early, and they should smoke the other team in attack and defense. So first one to the ball, they become the attack. Second one becomes the defense. They have to react from there. So just make it a race and make it competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can expand on that as you work into your team plans. But it's just a simple activity. So hopefully that will answer a little bit of that, and we'll show some footage there about what happens when they get it wrong. So players who don't work hard enough to get into shape, they tend to always be running sideways, which then nullifies whatever other attack you might want to use. There will be times in your strategies and your tactics where you might have players running sideways for a purpose, for a reason. But the ones that run it for no reason are the ones that usually take away all that outside space. So straight running would be skill number 1 for me. Being able to run at some sort of pace and be able to run square and pass is gold. And some teams are starting to get better at it, which is nice to see. 2-2-2s. So these sort of things here, just you need to know your people. So you need to have a look at the personnel you have in your team. If you want to run a 2-2-2, I tried to do this when I was with the Blues. Well, I suggested it when I was with the Blues. It never happened. But I suggested it because of the personnel we had. So we had big, strong backs who were as tall and as strong as some of our forwards. So they fitted into these patterns. They were ball players as well. So they would fit in that pattern. But that's what you need. You need athletic players. You need some forwards with some good skills and some big backs with some good skills as well. Because even though it's a 2-2-2, often there's a third player not far away from that area that kind of joins in and becomes part of their three. So having some good ball players there. So that would have suited that team in my opinion. In Connacht, we played a 2-4-2 because we had a couple of guys that weren't too bad off the edge, but our forwards were just hard workers really, and we had a couple of guys who had good ball skills. So we had one guy basically who was our ball skill man in this forward pod, and he became the target of every team that we played. They all tried to shut him down, but he was smart and he was a good player, and he was wonderful in that position for us. That changed his game. He'd never played that game before, but we identified a skill that he had that he was good at. He was a big guy who didn't like getting hit, so he made it even more desirable, really, because he didn't want to get caught with that ball too many times. So it worked really well for us. So when you're looking at whatever these things you want to do, you need to identify the strengths and weaknesses of your team. Do a little profile sheet on them. I've got a profile sheet that I use now. So if I'm with a team, I just kind of write down, tick all the boxes, and it kind of gives me an idea what the team is overall. So, can they catch? Can they pass? Can they pass to the left? Can they pass there? All those little wee things there. And that'll give you an idea of what sort of team you have. And then you can start looking at this sort of stuff. And then how they run in those zones. A lot of teams will have a different shape to a different zone. So just like defenses are often different in zones, so some of the attacks. Okay, here we go. Shapes and maps. So finding your language here. So every team should have their own language. How you call it, for example, is what you might do. So when you're designing it, you need to have language that makes sense to your players. So I'll give you my one that I've been using for years now, and I don't think it's going to change the world. And I used it. I got a lot of it from Pat Lamb when I was working with Pat, but I just would use the extremities of my arm. So if it was my fingers, that meant we were going wide. If it was my elbow, we're heading to the middle. If it was my shoulder, we're going close. There are other variations of that, but that's it in a nutshell. So if we have a line out here and I say we're going shoulder, we're aiming to this zone here, for example. If I say we're going elbow, we're aiming here, and for fingers, we're out here somewhere. So you'll adapt that, you'll add more, you might have wrists and bits and pieces. But that was easy, and it was easy for the players to understand. So have something like that that makes sense to the players. It can even be alphabetical of some sort. It could be anything that's hierarchical. I think you can use to be creative in that way in how you start your attack. So get your language right, or else the players won't understand you. It's a waste of time coming up and saying, okay, we're going to run a Mazda Hurricane, blah, blah, because that will lose them. So making sure you nice, clear, easy to understand language. So that's the simple side of it, So keeping that sort of language simple is really is great. Also, when you're doing this sort of stuff, you need to know what the roles of the source players are. So if you're a back, for example, or there's a 5-man line out, what's the role of those players? Because that will dictate where they're going to go next. So if you're the jumper in a line out, it's going to be a lot harder for you to make that first breakdown. So where are you going to go next? You know what I mean? So understanding that role. Also understanding that role that if your throw goes awry and somebody else has to jump for it or somebody else claims it, now the roles of those two people might change. So then all of a sudden, the guy who thought he was doing one thing is now doing something else because he's ended up winning the line out. So that is another thing you need to take into consideration. I use the simple words, you're either employed in the line out, which means you're a jumper or a lifter, or you're unemployed in the line out, which you're not involved in any of those roles. And that makes it really simple. So I use that all the time. When you get to the higher level and the pros and that, it's a little bit different. Well, it's not really, because the concept is still the same. You know, but your language might be a bit more complicated because of the opposition are probably onto that through a lot of video analysis, etc. Your attack is always all about the ball. So you can't attack without it. So if you're running a pattern, say you're running a simple 2 round the corner type thing, at that first breakdown, if everybody's in a hurry to get around the corner and nobody goes to the breakdown, it's a waste of time running that play. It's always about the ball. Ball is priority number one. And often we'll see teams who will be running these shapes and these patterns, and the players are already in shape to get the ball, but nobody's actually looked after it at the breakdown, and it's been a turnover, and you've just got guys standing around. Now you're in defense. So it's got to be all about the ball. We've talked about options before. You need to have lots of options. You might have different terminology if you're going to run off your 9 or off your 10. And there are reasons why you might do that. If you go wide, for example, instead of your forwards trucking all the way over, they might run off a 10. You might come back off a back, just to make it a bit easier on their running. You might not run off 9 or 10. You might have some other variations that you want to try yourselves. You always need a call that's going to cancel everything and say all bets are off. And that might happen from a line break. So line break policy for me is a line break means, okay, all bets are off. There's no shape anymore. We're going. You know, if you get tackled and you get and a breakdown happens, then you look to get to an edge again so you can get back into shape if you have to. So, but don't be scared. You don't see it so much these days, but at one stage when all this was being formed, somebody would make a line break and they'd almost deliberately get tackled so they could get back and run their shapes again. So that kind of seemed really weird to me.
Yeah, Dave, I had a question about that.
Yep, far away.
We are talking about structure, but we also talk about open play when we break the line. So in your trainings, how do you balance the work between structure and open play?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think your structure is kind of your base. But in trainings, if we're running a training that's about our shape, have 2 rugby balls if you're the coach. Have 2 rugby balls, get them into shape, and then randomly drop one, kick one, and saying that's the one you're playing.
Mm.
You know, that's a very, very simplistic way of doing it, but it's very effective. And giving them an understanding, and also making sure that part of your training there is a free play type activity at training where anything goes. You know, just give them a minute or something of that. We used to finish trainings starting from our own try line, for example, from a bogus line out with soft defense against us. And our thing was everybody had to touch the ball at least twice before he scored at the other end. And no breakdowns. So it was all offloads. It was all quick passing. We weren't allowed to go into contact. And we just did that for a bit of fun for the players. but it was also, it upskilled them to learn to play out of shape. So does that help, Gabs?
Yeah, thank you. Good.
Players kind of like it as well. So, but for balance, I'd be making sure that you're getting them into those shapes and understanding their roles within them prior to that. So I'm going to show you one here. Sorry?
You were calling about when you would cancel the structure, like a clear break through the line is obvious. Are there other ways they would cancel it?
Might be if a couple of your players get held back on the ground and they can't be where they need to be, for example, and you might run out. You haven't got any players who can substitute and fill into those roles. So that you might have to cancel there.
What would you do then? Would you then slow it down, or would you just reshape and do something else?
Yeah, reluctantly, you'd probably have to slow it down and then probably work to an edge, Brum, so you can get back into shape again. It's easier to get our shape from an edge as it is to try and get shape from the middle of the field. It plays into the hands of the defense for a little, unfortunately, but sometimes that's what we just have to do.
Okay. You were also talking about different shapes, and you're talking that different teams had different shapes. Within a game, would you only use one shape, or would you maybe switch in between different shapes?
That comes down to the caliber of your player. Probably most teams would just have one shape.
Yeah.
But they would have lots of, and we'll talk about that too, lots of variations from it. So I'll show you some variations in this next couple of clips here, and you'll see how you can easily have a shape within a shape. I guess would be my best way of describing it. So, and that's usually dictated by where you are on the field. So I'll show you this. Like this here, for example, is probably familiar to all of you. You guys can all see that? Yep. So you end up with sort of that picture. Don't take too much attention to the jersey numbers, but so what shape's that, everybody?
1-3-3-1.
Yeah. So that's pretty much your standard 1-3-3-1. So that's pretty common, right? So understanding how that works there and how you train it. So that's how you might map that out, for example. But what I want to show you in this one here, so you have mini maps. So with them, you might change a few things because you need to make sure that any one of those breakdowns, you need to be able to come left or right. You need to be prepared. One thing, it paints a picture to the opposition that you're alive in all areas. If you're quick to shape, it really puts pressure on the bad guys. The multiple options like we just talked about. What is gold for attack is lightning quick ball. That's gold for us. Players in motion, always you always have to pay attention to players who are moving. Whether they're moving in a way that they're going to be used directly in that attack or whether they're going to be used in a way to create space for others. But you need players moving always attract people. We're looking to stress the defense, and we talked about the cancel call and understanding spatial awareness. But I just want to show you this one here. Here we go again. Okay, so no different from the last one because all that bit's the same. So that's our 1-3-3-1 shape. Boom. The difference is we've shaped up differently coming down that side there. So this might be part of your plan. This sort of shape sometimes works really well off a 2-4-2. So I know somebody was asking me about a 2-4-2. These shapes work well off a 2-4-2 because you can do them from a little bit more of a central spot if you need to. But this here is, the magic 20 meters. So if you don't want to cram too many players down a 20-meter space, so you might have to change the way they're formed up, for example. But it's just enough to make the defense worry about it, but not enough that they're going to necessarily pile a lot of numbers there. You know, and especially if these ones are showing all around the corner here, it really looks like this is going to happen. And then come back here, and these people in this, they might have different roles. They might have different roles. You've got lots of options can happen here. 10 can challenge, throw inside to 15. 10 can throw across to 8, who can drop it inside to 13. 8 can come under. 13 can go around the back, and you've got your winger on the edge. So there's lots of different things you can do just there. So we would do a lot of that edge type training with those players. Lots and lots of that. Of course, you'd have this, so you can change your 15's line, and all of a sudden he can become a link, and we can run out this side if you want to. So having somebody who can pivot around like that is kind of handy as well. And he's also running from a blind spot, so defense might not take him into consideration. Almost there, gang. Yep.
What's LQB again?
Lightning quick ball. Lightning quick ball. So, and that's gold for attack. We want lightning quick ball. That's why the offload game for me is wonderful. Anything that makes the defense have to work so much harder to get into structure, because, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but defense wants to connect. That's where they get their power from, being connected to those around them. So LQB, offloads, that kind of breaks that connection. And that's what we're trying to do when we're on attack.
All right. Thank you.
So, bear with me, guys. We're almost there. We're into the videos soon. It'll be a bit more fun for you. Strikes, you strike the score. So a strike player is usually your back attack, but not necessarily just backs. Like we said, from a short line out, you can have your forwards out there. They're all about, again, going forward, players in motion, options, deception, clarity, and vision. So knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. And this is, so how do we train that? This is understanding where are you going to, where are you targeting? Who are you targeting? Are you going to be flat or deep? That will dictate how that works. Often, if you can get tempo ball, so LQB, often you have the benefit of being able to run flat. Are you going to challenge the line where you'll be flat, or are you going to bend the line, which means you might go back door, or you'll throw back to some players and you're trying to skirt around the outside? You got to look into the weather. Sorry?
What does bend means on defense
So bend means you might have a front line here, for example, like similar to this diagram here, but this guy might drop a ball back to here, and the rest of the backs might be on a deeper setup. Okay, so you're trying to entice the defense up, but then getting around them that way through the passing of through either the pass or speed of player. So things that also you can't control wet days and windy days and things like that. And then you need to have some weapons. So this is my theory, guys, and this is how I look at the game now. And it comes from that conversation I had all that time ago with one of those players. And if we look in a situation like this, these three players here, they want to stay connected in defense. That's their job. If one rushes up, then they're under pressure. If two go one goes this way and one goes that way, they're under pressure. So they want to stay connected and work together because they feel comfortable that my friend is looking after my inside shoulder if I need him, and I've got somebody else who's out there helping me if I need him on the outside. So that's comfortable for them. So if we can get somebody running fairly directly here, this guy then has to stop. He'll sit, or he won't be able to think about getting out to his mate just yet because he's still got to look after this guy. Okay, so that starts to put a little bit of fracture, so they might have to change their line speed or whatever. This guy here, if he has two people running down his channel, like this one and that one, for example, and there's this guy at the back showing, a hinge player who's lethal, then this guy has got two people running down his channel. He's thinking, hell, which one do I get? Do I take this guy, which I jump in? Do I jump out and get this guy? But then I've but I haven't got my buddy to help me on the inside here. So he's kind of stressed. So we're picking on this guy here. But the key player for me is this guy. So he's my trigger. Because if this guy here can't rely on him, this guy's by himself, this fella has to make a decision. Am I helping him, or am I worried about what's going on out here? If he jumps in, this guy would throw backdoor pass to that guy. If he stays out, this guy might get a short ball. Okay, so just try and look for who you can trigger. Sit one guy down, pick on another guy, and then react off the trigger. So I've been playing with this theory for a long time, and I don't know, it's probably been used by others before me, and I just thought I was a clever guy one day. But when you implement it at training, you can see how it can work, and it can give your players the idea of having their heads up and looking and getting some vision going. Simple activities, just a bit of repetitive work here, and you can get bigger numbers. And you can just change the numbers of your defenses, obviously. So just something for you to play around. I'll hopefully some of the video footage might show something similar. So this is kind of my area when I'm working with the team. So your attack weapons. So this next diagram might scare you a bit, but those are just some of your attack weapons that you want your players to be adept at. There's nothing fancy there. They're all, or maybe a trick pass and a no-look pass. They might be kind of fancy, but without talking about our set piece too much at all, really, these are things that all players should be able to do. And that's my job with the teams that I work with, is to get them adept at these things here, because these are just the weapons that they need. They need to understand different running techniques, different kicking techniques. Not everybody, but it's part of it. How they carry, what they do with the ball. Are they fending? Are they bumping? All whole gamut of passes they need to be able to learn. Some not even mentioned here. What does a return ball look like? What's a switch look like? Running lines are vital here. I do, and Dirk, you might have even seen me do some at IRANs where we look at the quality of the running lines and the understanding of the players of what they're trying to achieve from a simple switch play, or a ball that they get it and give it back. Why are they doing it and what are they trying to do? And most players, particularly young players, will have no idea. They've seen it on TV. That's why they do it. They don't know who are they trying to sit down, who are they picking on. They have no concept of that. So going through these things in a big part of your season, and this is ongoing. You'll do it in your pre-season as much as you can, and it would be ongoing all season. It would be part and parcel of all of your trainings. These elements in some way or form, not all of them at once, but you would try and squeeze these elements into your trainings as often as you can. You will find some that will work well for your team because you have the right personnel and it becomes a strength, then that's great. You'd probably lean a little bit more towards that, but don't forget to throw a couple of the other ones in there as well. A lot of work involved.
What are reverse pass and trick pass?
Yeah, a reverse pass might be from the base, so it might be a halfback throwing it back the other way, for example. A trick pass, that might be Carlos Spencer type things, where he'd throw it up and don't pass it at all. Something that would be just a special that a player might have amongst you. You've always got one player who can usually do something. We used to have a guy that had big hands and he could throw it with one hand gridiron style, so whatever that might be. If they've got one, let them use it if it works, and it could be a weapon for your team. Does that answer that, Bram?
Yeah. I have another question, because we're talking a lot about skills, but a lot of the times they're time restricted. So how would you emphasize players to use these skills without coaching them necessarily? Like, how would you motivate or make it attractive for them to try these things?
Well, you're probably going to have to coach them, unfortunately. But yeah, what I try and do, like involve them in activities. So for me, particularly these early ones here. So do we all do passing waves here, guys? Passing waves are, every club uses them, we're just running past. Kind of boring, but bring different pass techniques into those plays so you can identify them. So Henrik, that's where I would start, identifying what a cut pass looks like. We'll run a simple wave drill, which hopefully every team in the world still does because they're still good. But then you might say, okay, last two guys on the end, or you two guys here, you need to throw a switch pass. You as a coach, you have a look at it, you let it happen a couple of times, and then you might just stop it and say, okay, when we're doing this, what are you doing? And ask them that question. And most of the time they'll just say, I'm just giving it to that guy. They don't understand that the guy who's throwing the switch, for example, his job is to get across as quick as he can. This guy's job is to go late and into space and not run back into the traffic, for example, as a simple coaching term. So you kind of disguise that stuff into your what the players think are mundane trainings. Does that sort of answer a little bit, buddy? Skills are king. Skills are king, Hendrik. And for me, the better skilled you are, the more expansive game you can play. Cool. All right. Yeah, go on.
Maybe one question: what's the difference between a downline and unders and overs?
A downline might be that hard line that maybe a forward might run on that angle, so you're almost aiming in behind a ruck or a breakdown. Where an unders ball would be that guy that comes under but usually gets back out again, Dirk, for me. So yeah, that's the difference. Good one, mate. Well spotted. Kicking is part of our attack. We've seen a lot of it in the recent World Cup with the high balls and the contestables. But for me, so we kick to either apply pressure, to soften the defence line, which the All Blacks were very good at quite a while ago, unfortunately. So where you might kick a couple out to the edge to try and take away line speed. So if you've got a team that's coming at you real hard, you might try and chip over the top of them or kick to an edge and make them think they have to change the way that they're defending. So you kick to soften the D-line. The playground is a principle that one of my good coaching friends used, and I just love the terminology. So if you kick in, you can get into the playground. So we're going this way, then you're putting pressure on the opposition. So if we were trying to get, even I used to use that term, if we're trying to get out of our area, get to the playground, boys. I took some stats when I was with the Blues when we played the Highlanders, because the Highlanders had a very good kicking game and we had a very poor kicking game. And I took the stats, and the first time that we played them, the amount of times they kicked from their area and the ball ended up in the playground in a positive area, and when play broke down, for them was quite high. And it was even high when the play broke down from their initial kick and they got the line out, was even more noticeable. So we had to change our kicking strategy and we had to learn to nullify theirs. So a lot of the times we would kick for no reason at all. They'd carry back and the ball would end up being back in our territory. So for me, that was a negative. But it wasn't until we actually did the stat, and I actually just drew dots all over a picture just like that and showed it to the players. And that's when we started to work on changing our kicking strategy.
Dave,
Big part of the game.
Maybe one question on that. If you're in the green zone, the small green band, can you say, or even in the red zone, can you say you can kick to strike, like a cross kick or?
Yeah. So in this area, yeah, you might kick to that space there. Yeah, there's a lot of teams now, Dirk, they put another zone in across through here. across that line there, and they call that another zone as well. Where they get into that zone, they might just maul or stuff. But there's also, the little kicks. You don't promote it as much. Well, I even still don't. I promote a good kick pass, but I might not necessarily promote it unless it's a well-planned kick through here, like a grubber or something.
So the zone you mentioned, maybe from the 5 meters. So that's probably from your analyst if they have no one from defense in behind, and then you do a grubber or a chip kick. Otherwise, you play with hands, I suppose.
Yeah, and it'd come down to what you see in the opposition as well. Like there's a lot of kick pass footy, where they've gone flat to these wiper kicks, and that kick has to be well executed as well, because if it's in the air too long, I got a good bit of footage. I'll show it at the end here. We can see a little bit of that going on, and of course now we have the 50-22s, which I think are great. Really good law to bring in, because on a 50-22, you're either going to sit back and defend it, in which case we will run. We might be spaced to run, or you're going to try and stop them up here, and then it's going to open it up. So I think it's a real cool rule, that one.
Dave, I have a question for the kicking game.
Yeah.
I think what I see in Belgium, it's hard to have a kicking culture. What can you recommend to build a kicking culture in your club? At which age do you start to put a purpose for the kicking? Like which age do you start to explain which kind of kick do we use, and which position and which purpose? Is my question clear?
Yep. I understand, Theo. I would be looking at, for me, here in New Zealand, probably 13 years of age, 14 years of age, when the players are just starting to get a hang for it. Up to then, like in New Zealand, we don't kick in junior rugby at all. So 8-year-olds don't kick. I think 10-year-olds, there's no kicking. I was allowed to kick once, I think, in 10-year-old rugby here. But 13-year-olds, when you're usually starting to play, to a proper shape. So then I'd probably introduce it then for me. But not too many weapons, just something simple.
Okay.
And it comes down to the accuracy then, and how well it's taught. So it's making sure, same as everything else, it's there for a reason, and understand that it's what you'll get when you first implement that is, as soon as you can tell a player they can kick, they'll kick all day. Kids will kick all day. They love kicking. I was working with some 8-year-olds last night. Can we do some kicking? No, you don't kick in your game, so we're not going to do it. But it's just making sure that it's always kick with a purpose. So I'd even, sell it to them in that manner. Okay, guys, we're going to do some kicking for a purpose here today. It's not just, I'm in trouble, let's just kick it, which you'll get a lot of.
Dave, I reckon you could probably incorporate that into some condition games and say, you can only score, for example, with a kick pass, or every time you're in the 22, you got to kick for, to grass it or something like that.
Perfect. Yeah, that's wonderful, Sean. That's exactly the way to get it across. Kids will love it in a game. Players will love it in a game. They get an understanding for it. Perfect. Love your work, mate. Love your work. Good. Okay, for me, speed is a weapon. Oh, sorry, Gav.
No, just because I need to leave now, so I wanted to ask you a favor. You mentioned earlier a profile sheet example.
Yeah.
And a book, player of an attacking structure book.
Yeah.
Maybe could you maybe show the guys, or maybe send to Bram some samples?
Yeah, so I can send because I've got the player profile thing on like a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I've got one, like I don't use Excel, I use Apple. So, but it's one of those sort of things. So I've got it on that. As for the player one, just give them a book. You don't have to have columns. You don't have to have necessarily a proper book. There are ones you get, but it's just a book.
Remember.
Yeah, they just write on whatever they like. Really?
All right. Thank you.
All good?
Thank you, Dave.
No problem. Speed is a weapon. So that's not only leg speed, but speed of thought. You know, decision-making speed, how quickly you can make those decisions. That's a weapon. When you attack, you need to attack with speed. So have some conviction in your running lines. And this is a thing that I'm always bringing up with the players, that speed is a weapon. Use it. Don't waste it.
Dave, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, Dick, fire away.
I think on a lot of teams, an amateur team and maybe on professional team, when they hit the pot, the lead player, if they pass to the navigator, a lot of players will slow down in space. Do you recommend keep the space high and give a no look pass, or because if you slow down in speed, you're probably gonna read that in the pot and you go immediately for the negotiator or the navigator?
Yeah, mate, it comes down to the quality of your player. You know, I think if you can be convicting that when you're challenging the line that you're going hard, and like for me, I got that plug pass, I call it, where they'll just basically, but you have to be highly skilled to do that. Even when we were in Ireland, when we first started throwing that ball out the back, we actually got our players to run forward, stop, prop, and turn back and throw it. And it was the same when I was at the Blues. And those were skilled players, but they just could not get that timing right, you know? So ideally, we want them to be able to carry with conviction and commit everybody. But probably in your early stages, you'll have to make it a little bit more clearer, because, you know, dropping that ball in that situation can lead you to all sorts of trouble, as you well know.
Okay, space. One more question before we go to space. Just
Sean,
go back to speed for 1 second. Because for me, that's the single most important asset to have when you're attacking, because you want to attack fast ball against an unset defense, etc., etc. How do you coach or teach the players? And now I'm specifically looking towards someone who's playing at 9, for example. You know, the guys are so programmed into forming their pods, forming the next phase, etc. Instead of just the 9 not looking where the next pod is, but just playing it out. I guess communication plays a role as well. But how to just play the ball and just let the guys run and have a go. Just strike. How do you coach that balance?
Yeah, that's a bloody tough one, mate. And I think that's one that all coaches will struggle with. I try and make everything as competitive as I can in training environments. So if you're blessed with having enough players, that you can have some sort of competition involved in there that allows players. But, you know, if they're set early, if they work hard off the ball to be set early, then your 9 should have the confidence that you can just let it go. If they're set early, the comms that are coming through to the 9 can help them do things quicker, because, you know, somebody's talking to them the whole time.
Yeah.
And like I played a 9 my whole life, you know, and I made my decisions on the way to the ball back in those days, because you had to. But I always ran from an approach line that I knew. So by the time I got to the ball, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Whether I was going to run or pass or hit that guy or the other. So I think that comes down to a lot of real rapid rep work, you know, in a short space maybe. So get your guys doing something like, you know, the old boring old round the corner stuff, but, you know, getting it at a high intensity. Which intensity is a hard thing to bring with our players, like some teams will be all over it, and other teams, they'll do the bare minimum to get the job done. And that's where, you know, some form of competition is the only way I've found to kind of spark them up a bit. So I don't think I really answered your question then, did I, Sean?
No, but it's given me food for thought. So I kind of have some ideas of how I can you know, I think the most say thing that sticks out, of course, is, you know, getting the 9 to look up before he gets there and see what's on and go from there. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, it's that approach line for a 9 for me. You know, you need to be almost approaching at a 45. So you know, your line of vision's really well, really good. Yeah, I hate a 9 that gets there and then has a cup of tea, as Coops would say. So
yeah, me too. That's why I asked the question.
Space, it's not the final frontier, but you need space is what the game's all about. You know, we need to understand how to see space. We need to understand how to create space, and when we have space, we need to know how to keep it. And I do a simple activity with players where I'll put them down a channel, a narrow channel, and I will say there might be 5 players in a narrow channel, maybe 10 meters wide, and I'll say you have to now run up that channel, and the ball never goes across your body. So they catch it from here and they got to give it back here. There might be 5 of you got to handle that twice in that channel. And very rarely do I ever get anybody do it well straight away. Very rarely. Probably it's getting more now because I've done it for a few years and people know about it. But so that there for me is about creating space where there is none. So I deliberately put them in a tight area, create space when there is none. Then I'll do a similar activity where the area is a bit wider. And I say, now you have to keep space on that outside channel. It always has to be there. I don't want players in there. You want to keep that space there right to the end. And on that one there, the ball always goes across your body. So those are my 2 hints that I give them. Creating space, ball never goes across your body. Preserving space, the ball always goes around your body. So that's the challenge. How do you do those 2 things? So it comes down to their running lines. It comes down to their acceleration or deceleration onto the ball. It comes down to manipulation through footwork. I'll do it without anybody in front of them. I'll then put myself in front of them. I'll tell them what they have to do to me, and then they'll start to realize what it is. So that's your conundrum, fellas. You can draw that down on a piece of paper amongst yourselves to figure it out. But for me, that activity is worth it's gold for me. I do it with young players. I did it with big fellas, but big fellas get real grumpy real quick because they get embarrassed that they can't solve it. But it's very simple.
Sorry, Dave. You were speaking a bit too fast for me.
Sorry,
Can you repeat how you create space and preserve space with your drill, please? Yeah.
So the challenge, without me telling you guys, the challenge is to create space when there is none. But what I ask the players to do is the ball never goes across their body. So if I catch the ball here, I have to then pass the ball back that way. Okay, so hopefully that'll start to paint a picture in your heads, guys. Preserving space is where I'll give them a wider area to work in. Still only about 15 meters though. Again, there's about 5 players. And this time the ball, they catch it here and they have to give it here. So it always goes across their body. Okay. They all have to handle the ball at least twice, and the distance is maybe 20 meters that they have to run. So I feel like sitting that and saying, okay, you guys all draw it down, draw it on a piece of paper and show me what it looks like at the end. But that's just without me showing, I haven't got video to show it, unfortunately, but I could describe it to you now. Would you like me to do that? So what it looks like when we want to create space in a narrow area, we need to make sure we got depth onto the ball. So if I'm a player and I'm sorry about me having to do it like this, guys, but this player is giving this player the ball. It goes across to this player. That's how we start the drill. So this guy knows he has to give it back that way. Okay. So he will then go forward, step out, and drop the ball back to a player who will then come at depth through there. So once that player drops to depth, he'll step out, and another player will come through the middle there. He'll step out and drop it in. So the stepping out part is them creating the space that was never there. So imagine I'm attacking you guys because you're all in front of me at the moment. So if I go up forward towards you and then bounce out, you trail across to me, you've now created a space that I now can drop a player into. Everybody got that? Yep. Okay. Preserving space, the ball now, I catch it here and it always goes across here. So now what I have to do is a defender in front of me here, I have to fix them, step in to drag them onto me before I pass the ball back on my outside. So I've taken that player, I'm running at them, I've stepped in, put them in here, popped the ball to my outside. So I've caught it here, popped it there. My buddy coming along, he'll do the same. He'll catch it, he'll square up, he'll step in, pass. So then we do that sort of a passing thing. So that space on the edge is always kept there. I've never described it like this before, guys, so I'm hoping that makes sense to you. I should get this on video, but so that's the challenge I give all my teams. What do you know about space? How do you create it? How do you preserve it? And that's what the game's all about. All good? Cheers. Be some interesting diagrams, hopefully. Where is space? Those are our pretty common ones. It's either around the bad guys, it's over them, it's through them, it's under them through grubbers, or it's right above them through contestable kicks. So there's a lot of space there. Anybody of you know Brian Ashton? I know Dirk does. Brian Ashton, wonderful coach, talks so much about space, it's unreal. He's got just wonderful. And he puts it down there. I'm not a mathematician, so one of you smart guys is going to have to do this equation. A rugby field, the playing surface is 100 meters by 70 meters. So whatever that is, square meterage. There's 15 players, there's 30 players on the field plus a referee. Each one of them uses maybe 1 meter to 2 meters of space each. So that's, what's that, 31 times 2 meterage. So if any of those written that down, the number that's left over is space. And that's a big number. So there's a lot of space on the field. So when somebody tells you there's no space, coach, there's no space, there's a heap of space. You just got to find it. Okay, so I think it's really kind of you think of it like that, and all of a sudden you realize that the game there's still a lot more we can do. And that's where you clever guys come into it. Use your brains and figure its way to make it better for us. Oh, sorry, and what are the things we're doing with space? One is to shorten the line, kind of what we talked about up here, to exploit it. So if we see space, we want to put people in it. You know, we really want to put people in the holes, and we want to use space to create a bit of chaos. So if we're distracting a player by dragging somebody here and then dropping somebody back into a hole, that's what we're trying to do. So understanding space is where our attacks comes. We're looking for space. That's what our attack's designed to do. And sometimes we have to make it, or sometimes we have to keep it, but we need to understand all about space. How we just talked about then, angles of attack, different ways we carry, some deception or kick variation. So that's how we find space. That's what we're looking for, and that's how we use it. So pretty so when we're designing our attacks, like we've come a long way here, because we talk about shapes and stuff like that, but you come right back to that space and everything is where you want to be looking. So I'm trying to give you here, I guess, a template for how you can start to look at your attack and how you can create different things from it. Just got a couple more slides here. Okay, cool. So this is my way of seeing it, the continuity map. I don't know why I've come up with that term, but we'll go with that. And it looks like a simple example. And the finals destination try line. So for me, your skills, your basic skills are your tools. You use a couple of those skills together to make a weapon. Okay. Those weapons, when they're all put together, is a combination of moves. Your space makers. That's what you're looking to make space with. And they then become your map with a destination of the try line. And that just kind of fills those gaps a little bit. So your basic skills added with a few things become part of your pods, for example, or your back three or whatever. And then all of these things combined into your map coming from the source will get you to the try line. And so when you're planning your season or you're planning your activities, this is where you got to start for me, knowing that at the end you want to be over here. Is that quite clear, everybody? I'm a visual sort of a guy, so if I put things out like that, they start to make a bit more sense to me. And this doesn't, obviously this isn't set in stone. You might have your own ways of doing that, but for me, it's a pretty tried and true method that produces pretty good results. Unless you fall in any one of these areas you break down, then those areas you might have to revisit. So if you're finding here that your pods or your small mini groups aren't doing what you want them to do, you might have to go back. Okay, are they using the right weapons? And if they are they a bit blunt, those weapons maybe? So you might need to go back here and fix that to go to there. I quite like looking at things a bit linear. It can be a bit boring for those of us who like to create a bit of chaos, but it's not a bad way of going back and figuring out what you need to fix if there is an issue. All good? Just a couple of things to consider when it comes to common terms. We kind of talked about this one already. Earn the right to go wide is a common term, and that stems from teams who are going sideways to sideways to sideways to sideways, but not going anywhere. So sometimes you have to go forward, commit players, condense that defense so you can go wide. Unless you've got a team full of absolute grease lightning guys who are super fast, often you're going to have to earn that right to go wide. Changing the point of attack is another common term we use in attack, and I love that one. So you might go right, then you might shoot back left. You might throw one pass, or you might throw two passes before you carry or something. So changing your point of attack is a good one to follow. What's in front or what's on? So this is a discussion, again, another really good coach I worked with. He always said, what's in front of you. We tell our players, focus on what's in front of you. That's where we're telling them to look at what's in front of you. But often what's in front of them is not what's best for the team. So it's not necessarily what's on. So what's in front of me might be a gap that I reckon I can get through that gap. But what might be on is a two-man overlap outside me. So we can walk in here, or I can struggle to score here. So sometimes, not always what's in front is our best option. What's on is our best option. So sometimes that terminology, when you look at it. Other terminology is, play the territory game. And if you've got a big booming kicker, then you might be comfortable to play the territory game. South Africa, big booming kickers, strong line out, let's go. Happy days. That's going to win you games. Okay. We talk about softening the D-line. We talked about that before through those kick variations, but it could also be from a player running from the base, for example, can sometimes take away a little bit of line speed as well because they have to focus on this guy now. Okay. Shortening the D-line, again, we've kind of covered that as well. So if we're on forming phases of attack, you might have maybe a 4-phase thing in your head. But after the second phase, the opposition attack line, a defense line is all of a sudden short and there's space on the edge. Well, then don't go to the other two plays that you've got up your sleeve. Just go straight to that space on the edge because you've created what you're trying to do, trying to shorten that defense line. Defense coaches tell their teams, fill the field, boys. Fill the field. So we're on defense, fill the field. Makes you look more ominous. Attack, okay, they want to fill the field, we need to shorten it. So we need to shorten that line. So you're thinking about those sorts of things. And the last one there is run, catch, pass, or catch, run, pass. Attack, guys, this is what we really want, run, catch, pass. So we're hitting onto the ball. So that will come from lightning quick ball, as we talked about before. Try and get your players to run, catch, pass. There will be times in the game they'll stand and deliver or they'll catch, run, pass. But for me, if we can upskill our players to move forward onto the ball, catching and passing, I think ideally it's going to enhance your attack. So those are common terms. I hear them everywhere I go. No questions? Cool, pretty straightforward. Okay, this is my little phrase. So clarity grows confidence. So if you know what you're doing, you become confident doing it. And that's in life as well. It's not just in rugby. Okay, then once you're confident, you feel good. So you're upbeat, you're positive, okay? Once you feel positive, you know what you're doing, you're going to do what you do better. So your performance is going to increase. You know, so making sure that the information you get through to your players, they fully understand it, they know why they're doing it, they feel good about doing it, and then let them loose on the opposition, basically. Still a fun game at the end of the day. Okay, cool. So I'll get rid of the boring stuff. As soon as my screen sharing, here we go. That's what I was looking for before. Whoa, okay, cool. So I can see how many of you fell asleep. What I want to do though is I've got some videos that I'll bring up and discuss. Before I get to that, everybody's all good? We're all still in one piece? Beaut. Okay. I know it's a bit of a talk fest, so I'll go back to sharing my screen and I'll see if I can hunt up this videos that I was looking for. The answer is I can't. So I'll just bring them up over here so I can find them. You guys can probably still see me. Okay, and now I'll share screen. Boom. Okay, cool. So this is just a training video that I'll play. Everybody can see that okay? The thumbs? Can't see it, Dirk?
Not yet.
Okay. I can see it beautifully. So
Still loading with us.
oh, it's still loading?
No, it's gone again.
Okay, so I'll go back out and I'll try and do it. Oh, and it's disappeared for me too.
Now so you're sharing right now, but it's the black screen.
It's a black screen.
Yeah, but it's loading. Should come.
Oh, really? Never had that before. Here I was trying to show all these videos to you guys as well. So what I've done in the past.
Wait a little bit.
Still
I might have
black
a
screen?
question. I might have a question. If you had, let's say you're playing with a 1-2-3-1 structure, and you have set up, let's say that your 2-1s are, let's say, your 7 and your 2. Do you always stick with the same numbers on the outside, or does it change from where you're attacking, or do you understand?
Yeah. So you mean your 7 and your 2, are they always going to be there? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So let's say I've decided that my 7 and my 2, or my 7 and my 8 are going to be the 2-1s at on the outside.
Yeah.
Does that change if you have an 8-man line out, if you have a 5-man line out, if you have a attacking line out, you have a defensive line out, if you have a scrum?
Not necessarily. I guess it comes down to the way that you either construct your scrum or your line out. But the biggest problem we do when we go 1-3-3-1 is those guys on the outside channels, they run straight there. So that's the worst thing we can do. We need them to work their way there. They don't have to be there immediately. So that way you can manipulate to get those better players in those roles. So they might have to look after a ruck or a breakdown prior to getting to where they need to be. And that's just the nature of the game. For the near side guy, it's a bit easier because he can basically just stay. But for whoever's getting to that far side channel needs to understand that he doesn't run past a ruck or a maul that he might be needed at before he gets there. But you can still use those people. If you have those people, it just might take you longer to get the right people where you want them. Does that kind of make sense, bro?
Yeah, but would you always put the same person on the outside, on the far wide, or would you change? So when you use your attacking structures, the people on the outside during a game, if you have not made any changes yet, is it always the same person that are on the outside?
Yeah, usually it would be, because they're there because they have a skill set that I need in that area.
Yeah.
So that's often the case. But again, like any of these things, with structure is probably one of the worst words ever invented in the game, because we look so deep at the structure that we forget we're playing a game, and we forget. Remember, right back at the beginning, I said it's all about the ball.
Yeah.
And I think what structure has done to the game has made us probably focus too much on getting to the shape, but without really focusing about what we can do with the ball. But yes, answer to your question, short term, those would be the same guys most of the time. Yeah.
Okay.
And when you train it, you'd probably make sure there's at least one or two more players who can fulfill those roles.
Okay.
Cool.
To go back to your screen, I still cannot see anything.
Okay.
Just say that your screen is loading.
What a pity. I've got a lot of real cool clips here, and I cut them on purpose just for you guys. I'll get out of screen share unless I can figure out another way of doing it. Because I've got about 8 clips from the World Cup, and I can send them to you guys, I guess, but probably not really the right way to go. Apple has changed the way their screens operate at the moment, so without me going into my preferences, I don't know how I can work my way around it. I'll try and do something while I'm talking to you guys. So any more questions, guys, about some of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I've got maybe one question, Dave. With
mate.
With a 2-4-2, it's again about structure, but for me, if I look at the 2-4-2, I think the Crusaders run that structure, but isn't it one of the more difficult structures to run, because you have a pot of 4 in the middle, and then after the pot of 4 you have to play to the backs, and then to the 2 in the trams, I suppose. How high has your skill level has to be to run that kind of place for a team? Because me, it's a difficult structure. If you see it on paper, it's easy, but to run it looks tough to me for players, and a high level of physics, I think.
Well, we ran 2-4-2 in Connacht. Often it becomes more like a 2, 3.1. So your 4 is almost a 3.5. So the fourth
you
guy,
it's with the floated player you work then, Dave.
yeah. So we would have our 2 here and our 3 and we had our 1 here. So we'd use that person how we wanted to, you know.
Yeah.
So I found they were a great weapon for us, was that floater player, because, you know, we could run around there and we could use them to run a hard line like we talked about. You know, we can roll the ball behind them.
Kind of sense your joker. It's your joker in a kind of sense.
Yeah. So you can use them really well. There'll be times we might have had the 4, particularly if we were just we knew we had to carry hard through whatever the opposition might be. So then the boys could get together. Sometimes the 4th guy would be at the back of the 3. So you got your diamond of forwards, basically. And they'd truck it up and we'd try and break some holes through the middle, you know. So
is that some creativity you give to the players then with the floated player, or is that something you as skills coach say, hey boys, we play like that, or is that some kind of creativity you give to the players?
a little bit of both. Like we might have some variations from that 4 or that 3+1. You know, we'd have them, so we'd train all of those so they were familiar with them. Certain opposition, we'd know that this one would work, so we'd be a bit harder on it. But then we'd then allow that creativity in our match play or in our team trainings where they'd be against the defense and they could read those. It was teaching them what cues we were looking for, Dirk. You know, like a turn shoulder or, you know, somebody bouncing out and things like that. So,
but if everything went well, you're ending with 3 forwards in the trams. Okay.
Well, sometimes there's times where that floater might have to join that too, because we might need some extra personnel at the breakdown, you know. Then we might go back through the others and then come back to them.
What is the period you say for your players? We need, for example, 6 months, maybe a year to work that has a good structure. How many time or how long does that take for that you say now I'm confident with that structure for our players?
Well, so you got to remember that when I was in Connacht, we trained every day. So we would be, it was either part of our conversation every day or part of our training every day. Our whole pre-season was all the skill sets that are involved in that, and the actual shape itself. All pre-season would be that. So that's every day. So, you know, you bring that back to a club level, where you might have like 2 trainings a week. It has to form a big part of your training, but it has to be part of a training that is, you still got a lot of that sort of stuff involved. It's still, you know, it's still opposed and things like that. So you build the nuts and bolts in the preseason and then try and, you know, fashion your weapons in the early games. And, you know, like it can be done at club level. I've done it at club level. I introduced a 1-3-3-1 to a team that was used to run 2-4-2. And it took a while, but we got there.
And would you say in club level, amateur level, like Bram said, the numbers are important, or do you say if the spaces are filled, it's good for me and everyone is working?
Yeah, for me, like we're trying to grow our players. Like our job as coaches is to make players that potentially could go on to higher honours, or at the least enjoy the game. You know, I find too rigid a structure just would break the soul of break my soul doing it as a player. You know, so I think structure is great, shape is great. If they understand that within those shapes, there's all those things. So if your shape has got a carry pod in it, for example, that carry pod's got to have variety that they can do, whether they're going to tip, drop back in, bomb out the back, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. If you're in the edge group, you need to know that you can run unders lines, you can run switch passes, you know, you can run overs lines. All those sort of things need to be there. And I think that way, you're allowing their flair to live within that structure. Not the other way around. You're not trying to stifle their flair so they have to stick to structure. Does that make sense, Dirk? I'm real passionate about that. I hate seeing, we don't want a team of robots, you know, because the players won't enjoy it, and eventually the spectators will get sick of it as well. I found the World Cup at times incredibly boring,
but
except when I watch the lesser teams, you know.
But isn't it already happened that we're made from some teams a little bit of robots in defense?
Oh yeah, totally, mate. I think defense has to be fairly robotic because defense is about connections and structure. You know, definitely. You know, your systems, your defense systems are designed, you know, they're pretty rigid, where I think attack needs to be a little bit more, allow a little bit more flair, and, you know.
May I ask, the past year I've noticed that my players ask for more structure, and I'm very much in a sense of, no, I want you to play what's in front of you. And they just keep asking for codes and structure and, you know, more of that. And
Yeah.
I am just baffled by it and currently don't know what to do with that. I'm giving them more structure, but I just don't understand why they would want it.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's that confidence things, Marie, they need to, it's nice to know where they're going. But
Yeah.
You stick to your guns there, I reckon. Don't let them run over. But
Well,
I'd make sure that you give them something inside that structure. So, okay, I'll appease with your structure. Okay. I'm going to give you 3 options to do from that structured shape. And maybe even give them ownership on one of them. Okay. And say, okay, I want you to show me your flair. You want to show me your structure. Let's meet halfway. Let my flair live within the structured shape that you're giving me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think
I'd train that in small groups. So train in small groups so you know what your structure is going to look like at a certain point. So, okay, this lot here are going to go against that defense. And you just let them kind of figure, oh, okay, we're here, but we can do this. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. All right.
Yeah, good.
Thanks.
Nice. I want to really get these videos up, guys. I don't know how to do it. Apple has changed, like I said, the way that I have all these little bounce up screens that pop up all the time. I'm going to go to another screen share again, and I'm going to try this one, which is you guys. So I'm going to see if I bring up something from here. Are you guys seeing that pop up on screen? Anything now?
Yeah, we see that proper, Dave.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, sorted. Okay, so this is, I'll just let you watch this, but this is Super Rugby team doing their, well, you'll see what shape it is.
Could you make the video a little bit bigger?
How's that?
Yeah, it's better.
So that that's your team talking. That's your driver. They make a mistake here, but they keep playing. You don't just blow the whistle and stop. This is pre-season. So talking again, see they're talking about different variations that they've got from all of those shapes. So you might do a bit of this in your training. Just let them run through a few times, get into the rhythm, letting understand the different things. If you've got a good playmaker, that's great. This goes on and on and on, so we'll just stop here. But it kind of, so you're not on your own if this is what you're doing now. This is from a few years ago, so they've sharpened up a bit, I hope, since then. But that was early in the season. We're just starting to get those shapes going with them. Okay. So I want you to, this is kind of a little bit long, so forgive me, but I'll just open it up before I play it. So just having a look at the different ways that these different 10s operate. So this is Finn Russell here. So remember what I talked about, run, catch, pass? Looking at his behavior here. Okay, so at the moment, Scotland's doing a lot of work here. But looking at that line there, they haven't really crossed these lines yet. Irish defence is pretty good. Still haven't gone much past that 10-metre line. Try something a little bit different then, and they got a bit of space. Okay, but most of that play was in that short area there. And then they stuff it. Okay, so that's them. Now, this is the Italians against the All Blacks. I actually like a lot of the stuff the Italians are doing here. But again, watch where they are in the field. So you'll notice there's a few guys filling for different roles. It's all about the ball there, so they had to commit a few more. So that I thought was good. That was their best bit of the play there. They got to an edge. Okay, so here's the Irish now. What's the difference here? Straight away, front foot, attacking. Players in motion out the back. Same again. Players in motion, options out the back. So they've gone from halfway to the 22 in a couple of plays. Slow ball's a killer, so they've had to generate something again. Player on the edge held his width. Fairly flat now in attack. Watch the winger here coming around the back, who's actually a halfback, old retired halfback, or he's around the back. So he's come out of the defensive equation and worked off his line. Now, this is the whole play just from a different angle.
Dave, maybe a question on that. Would you give the blindside winger the option to roam free over the field?
Yes. Yeah, simple answer, yes. Your blindside winger can be your best weapon.
So
gone are the days when they stand on their wings. Yeah.
So the nicest try is a blindside winger who scores on the open side, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, I think they're the biggest weapon. Every time you can get a player in the back there, you know, it's really hard for the defense to work on. Cool. So we know what they do there. This one is, you'll have a look at some of the weapons here that we talked about. Tell me if you're falling asleep, guys. Okay, so the Irish, who obviously I was a bit of a fan of. So there's a return ball. There's a backdoor pass. This is what I call a bomb pass, that at one to your navigator. Here's a really ugly return ball. So that didn't work for them. Their timing was wrong. There's an inside pass. Same setup, slightly different variation. So the variation is coming here. So it's a different return ball. Short ball, offload, try time. So you'll see it from different angles here. So watch here. So Johnny Sexton straightens up a little bit, which turns 11 in, opens up that space for Bundy. And some offloads there. So those running lines are important there. And you can see up close here, fighting, get those arms free, get the ball away. So those are simple things that you'll be coaching your players in their skills. This is something similar here. I thought the Italians did really well here. Good finish. But it all comes from what happens in the midfield here. Like Rico has kind of found out a little bit in this one. So in and away, so he gets outside Rico here, gets a fend going, and then straightens into that space before feeding it. He had a bit of work to do. The All Black cover defense was pretty good, but that fend got him into that space. And then because he squared up, he turned a player in, but then gave the extra space for the winger on the edge. Good finish, I thought. All Blacks here, simple strategy. Boom, there's your kick pass. Will Jordan still had to work. But how quickly Geordie Barrett gets the ball to foot there. So that's kind of what you were talking about, wasn't it, Dirk, really? And this is just great footwork. Look at this guy. This is magic. He's almost flying. Even the cameraman couldn't keep up with him. You know, so those are all weapons that you should have in your team arsenal. I'm going to throw a couple more at you guys here. I want to show I'll talk about this one. This might be a bit controversial, this one. So just watch. So here the Scottish. Flat ball, great. Over the gain line, really great. And then didn't work hard enough. Imagine if they were in this space here with a bit more width. There's our second to last defender out there. Missed opportunity for me. Just too deep. Here there's a bit of confusion. Winger was going in, now they start coming back this way. This guy's running the wrong line. This guy needs to be out here. And then they might have been on a 2-on-1 here, but they missed that opportunity. Turnover. This one here, again, starts off not bad. Nice little tip. A little bit of go forward, not a lot. Turn this corner here. There's a man defending here. What's this guy doing? If he was into this space, this guy's flatter. All of a sudden, that was the last defender. Too deep. They had front foot ball, need to get flat. So those just depth for me, understanding momentum on attack. I'll give you this one as well. And then we might have a chat. Okay. So the All Blacks have got numbers down here. I thought they could have done that better. So now they're going to come back that short side. Probably missed pass, I don't know. Watching here. Where's the space? These are your last two defenders. Probably could have flattened up there, gone a bit quicker. Same here, numbers on, square up, pick them off. They had enough players. They do really well here, though. And they actually do score. This one here, we stop here. Look at those numbers against that. But look at the depth. This guy's never going to get there. These guys are all up into this space here. All Blacks are in deep trouble. But because they're deep, All Blacks have time to get players around the corner. A little bit of lateral running, and they can look after it. This one here decided to do a kick pass. There's no, look. So if we go back on that one, decided to do a kick. That's the last Fijian defender. These guys are all deep. Nobody's into this space here. And the kick pass with all that space. So, you know, using the right weapons. Fijians here, a little bit flatter. Boom, 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 through their hands, pick the last man off. They could have just picked him off instead of committing him. I don't know why that. Oh, yeah, that's just to say that's your last defender there. Actually, I thought the Portuguese played some pretty good footy as well. So, I got more clips, guys, but I think it's getting a bit late. So, any questions? I see a couple of guys asked about a few of the questions that you guys brought here. Have I answered most of those, talking about the organisation of the backs and how to communicate where to attack? Somebody's asked that. That's a little bit about that navigator role and how they can then play quite a big role at directing the forwards around the field and getting them into place early. Any questions, guys? Because it's been a long morning or long night for you guys. Nothing?
Yeah, Dave, maybe one more question. I know you're a world-class skills coach, and I know you're very keen on the skills on players. How important or how much time do you take in the pre-season just about skills and not and transfer it to the games? Because I think I speak for myself, and a lot of teams, they do a lot of games, but if the skills are not very thought through, yeah, they make a lot of errors and the skills aren't get any better.
Yeah, well, you know me pretty well, mate. Like, skills are king. So pre-season, for me, when I'm working with a team, pre-season's basically mine. So I would be skills every day. Skills would be the basis of everything. Any game that we might play would always be a skill-based game where players are rewarded or punished on the execution of their skill. You can implement elements of your game plan. So for me, when I worked with Pat, for example, in Connect, I always knew what his game plan was, and I knew what shape he wanted to play and what was inside it. And then my job was to put all that detail in there. So, but I could bring that into a training. I had some clips of that I could have shown you too, but I don't know where they are. So we could bring, like my carry groups, we'd do some skill work with them, but it relates to how they're going to fit into the game. So my skills always related to what they were going to use in the game and how they were going to use it. So right down from the micro part of the skill to the part where it's all part of their weaponry. Does that answer, mate? Skills. Anybody else?
Yeah,
I have another
I've got
question.
Oh, sorry.
So my question was from the set piece up to your structure, your attacking structure. Do you have all the moves planned out, or do you leave some room where the players have to decide where to hit which rock or where to run until until the attacking structure is set up? So do you all say, yeah, you have to run this rock, then this rock, then this rock, or do they kind of have to choose?
No, so we would probably map out three phases, potentially 3 phases that the boys would work to, and then after that, all bets are off. But it's amazing though, Brahms, you're basically in shape by then. So the players they just fall into it. It just becomes what they're doing. But yeah, about 3 phases usually. But your first phase is, like I said, with your strike play, you still got to strike to score. So if you've got a line out 20 meters or 35 meters out, and the plan is to go to the middle, send a group around the corner, then go to an edge, for example, we still want our guys to try and make that first line break, and then all bets are off. You know what I mean? But at least we've got players in that right direction.
So let's say your backs have a strike play. So most of the times the forward then know where they're gonna strike, or okay.
Yeah, so they would. So they would know what the backs are doing.
So depending on that, they know where to run and who had to run, hit which rock and stuff like that.
Yeah. So they'd know that the backs have called, or even there might not even be a call, like they might be already pre-planned, but they'll know that they're going to go through the middle there somewhere. So long as they're hitting in the right way, then we're okay. You know, it's if they've got no idea and they get up and they spend half their time looking for what's happening, that you're going to get caught out. But if they know that we're going to the middle, or they know that we're going to an edge, or that we're going to go really close to them, that dictates how they're going to run. So, but don't overcomplicate it by giving them way too much, because once they're in their shape, they'll play anyhow. And as long as they've got the skill set to do it, they'll just keep playing.
Yeah.
Cool. Here.
Yeah. For the depth, what are the observables for the forwards and for the backwards to find the good depth?
Yep. Okay. It comes down to line speed of the opposition a lot of the time. So if they've got heavy line speed, now this is conjecture here, because just because a team has a lot of line speed doesn't necessarily what most teams will want to do. They'll want to get deeper. Okay, because they want time to do whatever they do. So for me, I've just conceded to the defense. I've just said, okay, you guys are too good. We're going to come back here so we can do something. So when it comes to the depth, we want to be, that's why go forward is such an important part. So if you can get go forward, whether it's from a rolling maul or whether it's from a short runner, if you can get go forward, then you can start to have a greater influence on the depth that you want to attack at. So ideally, we want to be fairly flat, because the terminology we use here is it's a race to the gain line. So the defense are trying to race to the gain line, and the attack are trying to race to the gain line. And whoever wins that race is going to get that go forward momentum. So for me, dictating our depth comes down to getting that first carry or that first contact with the opposition to be a positive one, ideally, in a perfect world. So that's why we teach our forwards to use footwork and not just be battering rams, because the higher the level up, sometimes that go forward only has to be like that much. It's tiny. And you can generate your momentum from there. Quick to set then would become the next thing they have to be at. So they have to get into that position really quickly. So the defense the defense is a little bit slow at regrouping, for example, you want your attack to beat them to be prepared. So if you can beat them around the corner and go forward, beat them to be prepared, then you've got that chance of maintaining that momentum. And once you have momentum, you try and do anything you can to keep it. You know, remember, because that's what the defense is trying to do. They're trying to take away your momentum, so then they have more time to set their structure up, so they can come hard at you or whatever the defense shape might be. So does that kind of answer it in a roundabout way?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Cool. Nothing else, anybody? So Dirk's recorded this, haven't you, Dirk? Yeah, so that means all you guys will have it. So so that's easy peasy. So if there's any questions, say you want me to, maybe I'll send that, I'll hunt up that profiling sheet that I've got. And you can play around with it and do whatever you want with it, really. It's in an Excel type sheet. So if you've got access to that, or if you're an Apple person like me, it's in a numbers sheet, and it's just a matter of, it's kind of neat activity. You go through every player in your team and you give them what's their catch pass like, what's their running like, what's their work rate like, what's their character like. It's quite in depth. Tick, 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 or cross, cross, cross. And then at the end of it, you kind of can have a look. It shows up your whole team. You just fill in all your team names and that. And you can have a look at it and go, okay, we've got a lot of people who can carry the ball well. Oh, that's good. So maybe you can play this way. Or we've got a lot of guys who are fast. Oh, well, maybe we can play the game that way. So play with it, adapt it, modify it. You'll have to change it to whatever language you want to be more comfortable with, and then do whatever you want with it. And, you know, whether it works for you or not, it's up to you guys. All good? Okay, yep. I better let you guys go to bed, and I can have a coffee. So